I sighed, a quiet exhale that barely disturbed the stillness of my garden, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the meticulously manicured rose bushes. At 66 years old, I had long ago come to terms with the fact that my heart had settled, that the reckless abandon of youth had long passed me by, and that love was a chapter of my life that had reached its bittersweet ending. My heart, I had told myself, was no longer capable of that giddy, breathless, head over heels feeling that I had known in my youth, and I was okay with that. My life had become a well-worn routine, a familiar pattern that I had carefully created to bring me peace and solitude after decades of raising children, of maintaining a home and maintaining a home, working tirelessly while always putting myself last. I had learned to appreciate the quiet moments, the simple pleasures, and the freedom that came with age. Twice a week, like clockwork, I'd pack my swimming bag, my towel neatly rolled, my old swimsuit carefully folded, and then I'd make my way down the familiar streets to the local community pool. The water, with its soft, cool embrace, had become my sanctuary, my escape from the worries, the heart itches, and the loneliness that had become my closest companions. The water always offered solace. It was a place where I could find my rhythm, my center, my peace, as my body moved through the water, cutting through the familiar coolness of it, a place where time seemed to stand still. I usually went early, before the crowds arrived, when the pool was quiet. The only sounds were the soft hum of the filtration system, the occasional splash of another swimmer, and the gentle lapping of the water against the cool tiles. It was so peaceful, the tranquility was almost hypnotic. And I cherished those moments, those minutes where I could just forget about everything, where I could just be, where I was finally alone, with only my thoughts and the familiar comfort of the familiar comfort. Water against my skin. This had been my ritual and my comfort for the past few years, ever since I had discovered that swimming was more than just a form of exercise. It was a way to ease the stiffness in my joints and the ache in my heart. But, as they say, nothing lasts forever, and the world has a funny way of throwing a wrench into the gears, and things were about to change. Everything did, that day that I met Jake. That's when everything shifted, when the carefully constructed piece of my life, my perfectly planned routine, was turned upside down, and that's when my world finally changed. Jake was the new swimming instructor at the pool. He was in his late 20s, a young man with a tall, lean build and an easy, infectious smile. His eyes, a striking, vibrant blue, always seemed to hold a spark of mischief, and he always seemed so full of life. I had noticed him on my first day back after a short hiatus. He was leading a group of noisy and excitable children at the far end of the pool. His voice was so calm and soothing, yet also so full of authority. He guided the kids with a patience that was both admirable and also strangely attractive. And even though I barely saw his face, I had a sense that I was drawn to him, almost hypnotized by his presence. After the class, I saw him in passing, near the lockers where I was drying my hair, and he gave me a quick, polite nod, as if he had also recognized me. I didn't think much of it at the time. Young people came and went at the pool all the time. Their lives never intersected with mine. I was a ghost in their world, and their stories were too far away from mine. The next time that I came to the pool, I found that I came to the pool, myself drawn to the pool edge, more curious than I had ever been about anyone in my entire life. I had to see him again. I finished my usual set of laps, and as I was drying off by the side of the pool, I noticed that he was packing up his equipment. So I gave in to the impulse, and against everything I had ever thought myself to be, I approached him. "Hi there," I said, my voice sounding surprisingly calm, but my heart was hammering in my chest. "You're the new instructor, right?" No. My voice was too breathy. James looked up, a surprised expression on his face, but he quickly greeted me with a bright, respectful smile. "Why, that's right," he replied, his voice full of youthful enthusiasm. He then paused and looked around. "You swim here pretty regularly, don't you?" He said it as if he had noticed me for a long time, and I knew then that I was done. I was hooked, I was caught. I blinked, surprised that he had noticed me. I felt a little self-conscious under his gaze. I was a woman of 66, and I was suddenly feeling like I was a teenager again. All flustered, all nervous, all butterflies. I wasn't used to being the subject of anyone's attention, especially not someone so young, so handsome, so full of life. "Yes, I do," I replied, my voice a little softer and more hesitant than usual. "I come here twice a week, always in the early hours. It's the only time that I can get some peace, you know," I added, trying to act casual, but my voice betrayed my true emotions. James nodded, his expression thoughtful as he glanced toward the water, those blue eyes as bright and clear as the summer sky, their intensity making my skin tingle. "You've intensity making my skin tingle. Got a really smooth stroke," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "You make it look so effortless. Have you ever thought about joining one of our adult swim classes? I think you'd be great in one," he said, his gaze never leaving mine, making my heart pound in my chest. I smiled, shaking my head lightly, feeling warmth spreading through my cheeks. "Oh no, I'm not competitive at all," I said, trying to keep it light, trying to keep my distance. I just swim for the peace that it brings me. I did not want to share my secrets. I did not want him to see the woman that I was, a woman who had been broken by loss, a woman who was just trying to keep her head above water. I was hiding, and I did not want to be seen. James's smile widened, the corners of his eyes crinkling, and he leaned slightly against the railing. "I get that," he said, his voice smooth and warm. "Still, it's impressive. You've got great form, better than most people I know." I felt a warm blush creep across my cheeks, flattered in a way that I hadn't expected. His words were so casual, so simple, but they were having such a profound effect on me. He saw me, he had actually seen me, and he thought that I was good. I had not felt like that in a long time. I had forgotten what it felt like to be admired and to be seen. Our conversation didn't last much longer, but something about it lingered with me after I left the pool that day. The warmth of his words, his gaze, his gentle smile. It all stayed with me. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was as if he had lit a fire inside me. I was finally starting to feel alive again, and I did not know if I should fight that feeling or if I should embrace it. And I was terrified. Over the next few weeks, our interactions became more frequent. I made a point of arriving earlier, hoping that he would be there, would see me, that he would speak to me, even if it was just to say hello. He too started to pay me more attention. He would greet me with a warm smile, offer tips on my stroke, and occasionally even swim alongside me for a lap or two. Our conversations grew from casual exchanges about swimming techniques to more personal topics. He would ask me about my books, my music, my favorite movies, and my dream. I would ask him about his art, his passion for painting, his dreams. Would ask him about his art, his passion for painting, his dreams of becoming a famous artist, his love for life, and his desire for freedom. I found myself looking forward to seeing him, a feeling that both excited and unnerved me, and that was exactly what I had been trying to avoid. I felt like I was losing control, that my carefully constructed walls were finally starting to crumble, that I was finally letting myself feel again, and I had no idea what I was doing. One particularly warm Sunday morning, I noticed him struggling with a bicycle tire. The frustration etched across his brow as he tugged at the stubborn rubber. It was an involuntary urge to help that propelled me across the yard towards him. "Do you need a hand?" I called out, my heart pounding in my chest. knowing that I was making a decision that would change everything. I needed to speak to him. I needed to be close to him. I needed to touch him, if even just for a moment. He looked up, a surprised expression on his face. But then, he broke into a bright, charming smile. Would you mind? He asked, his youthful charm making my heart skip a beat. I've never been good with this stuff, he admitted sheepishly, scratching his head, making him even more endearing. I could barely breathe. Kneeling beside him, I felt a giddy thrill in our proximity, a feeling that I hadn't experienced in decades. His hands were clumsy, but eager to learn, and I felt an overwhelming desire to show him, to help him, to be there for him. In any way that I could, we spent the afternoon laughing and struggling together, and it felt oddly normal, yet incredibly exhilarating to be doing this with someone so much younger. It was like I was reliving my youth, but with a wisdom and confidence that I had never known before, and that was both powerful and intoxicating. I was having fun, and that was all that mattered for now. Thanks for the help, Claire, he said, handing me a cold drink afterwards, his eyes sparkling with genuine gratitude. You make this seem easy, he added, a warmth spreading through his gaze. I was hooked by his gaze. I looked into his eyes, and I felt seen. It's just practice. Anyone can do it with enough time, I replied, feeling an unmistakable connection rooted in our shared laughter, a burgeoning kinship that I had not anticipated. The words had just escaped my lips without me even thinking about it. And in that moment, I realized that something had changed between us, a shift in the dynamic of our relationship, from one of all simple kindness to one of something much more profound, much more dangerous. Something about Jake made me feel alive again, as if I were rediscovering parts of myself that I had long buried under layers of routine and resignation. I had been numb for so long, and now I was starting to feel again. And I had no idea what to do with these new feelings. It was like a dormant part of me was awakening, and I was starting to feel things that I had not thought were possible. That I was starting to feel things that I had not thought were possible. Feeling love, desire, and hope. And it was so overwhelming. As our interactions grew more frequent, the barriers of age and experience began to dissolve with each exchange. Our conversations became longer, more personal, and more intimate, brimming with shared interests, heartfelt confessions, and playful laughter. I found it so easy to talk to him, as if we had known each other forever. It was as if our souls were recognizing something in each other, something that was both familiar and unknown, and I was starting to fall for him. One afternoon, we found ourselves sitting on my porch, the sun setting behind us, casting warm hues of orange and pink across the horizon, our bodies touching ever so slightly, sending sparks down my spine, creating a world where it felt as if we were in our own private universe. He was so close, and I could feel his breath against my skin, making my heart race. Where did you grow up, Jake? I asked, genuinely intrigued, wanting to know more about the boy who had slipped into my life so seamlessly, wanting to know everything that there was to know about him, his history, his dreams, his fears, all the things that made him who he was. I wanted to know everything about the man who was starting to take over my heart. He leaned back, seemingly lost in thought, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. Small town a few hours from here, he replied, his voice soft, his eyes distant, lost in the memory. It was okay, but I always wanted to be somewhere lively, somewhere art and culture mattered. He then looked at me, those blue eyes, so full of passion, somewhere like this. Art, you say? I replied, my interest peaked, my heart skipping a beat, my body starting to burn with desire, wanting to know everything about him. What kind? Mostly painting, he replied, and his enthusiasm was palpable, his face lighting up, his eyes shining with passion. I love the way it lets you express emotions without using words. It's like breathing to me, you know? It's like I can finally let everything out. He smiled, that warm, gentle, heart-melting smile. I'm not good with words, but I'm great with a brush. I paused, surprised by the sincerity of his words, but also drawn to him. I used to paint a lot, I confess, surprised at my own vulnerability, as if I had just discovered a long-lost part of myself. Life got in the way, I suppose. I haven't picked up a brush in years, my words full of longing, full of regret. He looked at me, his gaze full of encouragement, his voice full of hope. You should pick it up again. I'd love to see your work, he said, his face lighting up with a spark of excitement that made my heart flutter, that made me feel like I could be young again, like I could have everything that I had ever wanted. And it would be great if you could teach me. I always did want to learn how to paint, he exclaimed. And I laughed. Maybe, I replied, not daring to let myself believe that all of this could really be happening. I knew that I was already falling in love with him, and that it was a very, very dangerous thing to do. At that moment, I realized that Jake saw me as more than just a neighbor. He saw the woman that I had been, and also the woman that I was capable of becoming. He saw past my age, my wrinkles, my flaws, and he recognized the potential within me. Something that had remained dormant for far too long. He saw the artist, the lover, the woman that I had been trying to hide, and he wanted to bring her out, to unleash her into the world. And somehow, that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Weeks faded into a blur of shared moments and laughter. Our friendship deepened into something rich with unspoken energy. I caught glimpses of longing in his eyes, and I could feel a magnetic pull between us, a simmering chemistry that was both innocent and also filled with a desire that I had not known how to navigate. I had always been so good at controlling my emotions, at keeping people at arm's length, but Jake had somehow managed to tear down all those walls, and he was showing me a world that was full of passion and desire, and I was not sure if I was ready for it. I was not sure if I could handle it. One sun-drenched afternoon, after a particularly light-hearted conversation about our favorite books, our hands brushed against each other while reaching for the same book, lingering just a heartbeat longer than necessary. It was as if time stood still, the world around us fading, the air growing thick with anticipation. And I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, peering down, not knowing what to expect, and that I was about to make a decision that was going to change my life forever. Uncertainty flickered between us, and in that heartbeat, everything changed. A spark had been lit, and it was about to grow into an uncontrollable flame. My breath quickened, and I found myself at the edge of something new. Something thrilling, yet terrifying. An unknown world that I was dying to explore. "Shake," I started, my voice trembling, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. And that was when it all changed. Before I could even finish my sentence, before I could even fully form the words in my head, before I could even think about the consequences, he leaned in, closer, compelled by an inexplicable urge to close the gap between us, to cross the line that we had been so carefully trying to avoid. Our eyes locked, and my heart skipped a beat, and he leaned in, brushing his lips softly against mine. It was seeing his lips softly against mine. A tentative kiss filled with hesitation, but it also ignited a fire within me that unfurled like the petals of a blooming flower. A forbidden kiss, a dangerous kiss, yet so undeniable. His lips were warm and surprisingly gentle, and yet they sent shivers down my spine. As I took a deep breath, his scent, his touch, his presence, making my world spin out of control. I was lost in his world, in his touch, and that was exactly what I wanted. I pulled away, breathless, surprised at my own boldness, at the sheer emotions that were swirling within me. I was a woman of 66, kissing a boy of 20, and yet somehow it felt so right, so normal, so incredibly natural, and that was both terrifying and exhilarating. How could both terrifying and exhilarating, something so wrong, feel so undeniably right? Doubts crept in as my mind replayed the kiss over and over again, trying to make sense of what had just happened, trying to make sure that it was real, and that I had not just dreamt it all up. It had to be real. It had to have happened. But what did it mean? What was next? How could this be possible? But the thrill of that moment pushed them aside for just a while longer as I surrendered to the present, to the desire, and to the longing that I could no longer deny. The memory of that first kiss was like a secret, a whisper in my ear, a constant reminder of the power that he had over me and the danger that was brewing just beneath the surface. I knew then that my life was never going to be the same, and I knew that I was heading down a path that was full of pleasure, but also full of pain, and I was ready for it. As the days turned into an intoxicating whirlwind of emotions, I wrestled with the enormity of what had just happened. The thrill of our kiss lingered like a forbidden whisper in my ear, a promise of a forbidden whisper in my ear, a promise of something more, but so did the doubts, the anxieties, and the fears that I had been so desperately trying to suppress. Could this be something meaningful, or was it just a fleeting summer fling? Would society's disapproving gaze cast long, suffocating shadows over our connection, making us hide in the shadows and making us ashamed of what we were feeling? Would we ever be accepted? These questions swirled in my mind, vying for my attention and threatening to shatter the fragile bubble of happiness that we had created. One evening, feeling a mix of apprehension and desire, I decided to invite Jake over for dinner, carefully set the table with my best china, the silverware gleaming under the soft glow of candlelight. A fleeting thought about what might happen next, making my senses tingle and my heart race. I carefully prepared a meal, each ingredient chosen with care and precision, the familiar routine helping to soothe my frayed nerves. It was an attempt to create a sense of normalcy, to ground myself in the familiar, while knowing that everything was about to change. I just wanted to spend time with him, to get to know him better, to understand the man that I had been falling for, and to see if what we were feeling was real. I wanted to make sure that this was not just some fantasy that was destined to crumble. When he arrived, his eyes lit up at the sight of the meal, his gaze capturing every detail of the room, as if he was memorizing everything. He was always so observant. I felt a rush of warmth swelling within me, a mix of love and a dangerous sense of anticipation. We talked about art, about his dreams, and also about my past, about everything that had happened to me, as if I was trying to get him to know the real me, the flawed me, the broken me, and to see if he could still love me, even when he had all of the facts, all of my secrets, and all my darkness in front of him. And then he asked, "Are you scared?" His words caught me off guard, his tone shifting from the casual conversation to something more serious, more direct, a glimpse of vulnerability that I had not seen before. My heart dropped at the question, as if he had finally seen the doubt that had been growing inside of me, like a cancer, threatening to take everything over. "No," I lied, my voice trembling slightly. "I mean, yes, I don't know." I stumbled, my thoughts jumbled, my words coming out all wrong. "It was just unexpected," I muttered, trying to get myself back under control, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy. But my mask had finally started to crack. He leaned closer, his eyes searching mine, confusion mingling with a flicker of hope, a touch of something akin to understanding. "Why can't it just be what it is?" he asked, his voice soft, as if he was trying to soothe my fears and also to reassure himself. "Sometimes a kiss is just a kiss, but..." He paused, his eyes now focused on mine, his voice taking on a more urgent tone. "But we're not just two people, Claire. There's so much more at stake. You know what I feel, right? You know that it is real. His words were so intense, so full of emotion, that it made my heart ache, and I could not stop my body from reacting to him. I felt the weight of the world pressed down on me. He was so young, so full of life, and I was just old and used. I was always going to be a reminder of everything that he could have had, but was not going to get with me. And what if we fell in love? What then? What would people say? What would my family think? It was too much, too soon, too hard, and my heart was starting to break. I want you, he interrupted, his voice firm and unwavering, each word slicing through my fears and also igniting a fire within me. I don't care about what others think, and I know that you feel it too. Why else would you be here? Why else would we be doing this? He said, his eyes piercing mine. I could feel the fear rising to the surface, like a wave threatening to drown me. All my doubts, all my insecurities, all of my anxieties came crashing back, hitting me all at once, and I started to doubt everything. What if they find out? What if this goes beyond a summer fling, or whatever you think this is? I asked, feeling vulnerable and exposed, feeling like I was being pulled in two different directions, feeling like I was losing myself all over again. What if this is just another dream? A fantasy, a fleeting moment that is destined to fade away. Nah, Leah, I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. He reached out, his hands cupping my face, his thumbs gently caressing my cheeks, his touch sending shivers down my spine, grounding me with a steady gaze. Then, let's make it worth it, he urged. His voice full of determination, his eyes shining with a dangerous mix of passion and conviction. Whatever it becomes, whatever happens next, let's make it a story that is worth telling. Let's make it a journey worth taking. We can't let fear control us. Not anymore. Right? His words were like a balm to my soul, his touch like a burning fire against my skin. It was like he had seen into my heart and understood all the fears, all the doubts, and all the anxieties that had been weighing me down for so long. It was like he was saying, it's okay to feel this, it's okay to want this, and that it was okay to embrace the unknown, to give in to my desire. What if you're wrong? I said softly, trying to hold on to the last remnants of my sanity. He smiled, a knowing smile that made my heart skip a beat and my body tremble. Then we'll face that too, together. We will take the good with the bad, and we will be there, stronger for it, no matter what. His words were like a lifeline, a beacon of hope in the darkness, a promise that I knew in my heart that I could not resist, despite my fears, despite all the red flags and the warning signs. I found all myself increasingly drawn to him, captivated by his spirit, his vitality, and his unwavering faith in us. I knew that it was wrong, but it also felt so right. I felt alive. I was letting myself be free. It was like all the barriers that I had built around my heart were finally starting to crumble, and I was letting myself love again, even if it was wrong, even if it was forbidden, and I did not know what the future held. We began to explore our connection further, allowing it to blossom while embracing whatever came next. Shared kisses transitioned into whispered confessions, our growing passion igniting something deep within both of us, something that had been dormant and was now finally bursting forth with a force that was almost overwhelming. As I had become a woman who had been awakened, and I was now feeling everything, our relationship was growing stronger, more intense, more dangerous, and I was surrendering to it completely, ready to face whatever consequences might come. One late afternoon, I suggested a spontaneous trip to a nearby art gallery, a place that I had always wanted to visit, but I had never had the courage to go alone. Jake's eyes lit up at the idea, and I knew that he was just as eager to experience this new world with me. We spent hours marveling at the various pieces, each brushstroke, each color, each scene telling a story, evoking a mix of emotions that were both overwhelming and also strangely comforting. It was like we were speaking a language that only we could understand. It was as if we were finally starting to learn about ourselves and about each other, and we were starting to merge, to become one, as if our souls were becoming intertwined. As we got lost in the details of every painting, we were also getting lost in each other. In a quiet corner of the gallery, a stunning painting caught my eye, a vivid landscape swirled with colors that sang to my soul, a vibrant expression of the full spectrum of human emotion, full of light and darkness, full of hope and despair. "Look at that one," I nudged Jake, my heart racing, excitement bubbling within me. "It's like it's speaking to me. It's calling out my name." He leaned in closer, his body pressing against mine, examining the brushstrokes with genuine admiration. "It's breathtaking," he admitted, glancing sideways at me, his gaze lingering on my eyes. "Just like you." His words unraveled my resolve, igniting a passion I struggled to contain, his compliments making me feel alive. We shared a moment of silence, the noise of the gallery melting into the background. As we were caught in each other's gaze, it was like we were in our own private universe, disconnected from the world around us, and all that mattered were the emotions that were swirling between us, the intense desire that was building, a force that was growing stronger with every passing second. "Can I kiss you again?" he asked softly, his voice trembling with a mixture of sincerity and desire. He was a man who knew what he wanted, and he was not afraid to ask for it. And I was drawn to that confidence, to that strength, and to that passion. It was exactly what passion I needed. I nodded, breathless, no longer able to resist him. And he leaned in, and our lips met with an urgency that felt new, exhilarating, yet also incredibly tender. The kiss consumed me, igniting a deep-seated longing that I had pushed aside for so long. He was setting my body on fire. I realized then that age didn't define our connection. Our feelings did. Age did not matter. It was just a number. What truly mattered were the emotions that were swirling inside of us, the fire that we had ignited, and the love that we were both starting to feel. And in that moment, I was completely and utterly lost. As our relationship deepened, the physical connection between us grew stronger, and those shared moments became more frequent. One evening, after a long walk along the beach, as the waves crashed against the shore, we found ourselves back at my house, sharing a bottle of wine and talking about our lives and our dreams. The conversation flowed easily, but there was also an undeniable tension in the air, a feeling of anticipation and an awareness of the forbidden nature of our desire and the danger that was waiting just around the corner. As the night wore on, our touches became more frequent, more deliberate, more intense. Jake reached out and gently took my hand, his tongue brushing over my skin in a way that sent shivers through me, his touch sending sparks down my spine, making my skin tingle and making my heart race, all while making my body feel alive. We moved closer, the space between us disappearing, our breath mingling, and our lips met in a kiss that was more intense than any before, filled with a passion that neither of us could deny. As we both fully surrendered to the feelings that had consumed us, and all that we could think about was wanting, needing, and desiring more of each other. We didn't stop at just kissing this time. His hands began to explore, tracing the curves of my body with a tenderness that made me feel cherished and desired. I responded in kind, my own hands moving over him, feeling the warmth of his skin through his shirt, my fingers tracing the lines of his body, his every touch a revelation, a journey into unknown territories. We lost ourselves in the moment, letting the world outside fade away as we finally surrendered to the connection that we had been building, the desire that we had been trying to suppress, the love that was starting to overwhelm us. As we were both finally giving in to the raw, uncontrollable passion that we had ignited within each other. I felt so free, so alive, so incredibly wanted. It was as if I had been awakened from a long sleep, and my world was finally starting to make sense. It was like I was learning to breathe again. The changing room, once a mundane place where I prepared for my swim, had now become a sanctuary for our secret moments, a place where we could explore our desire and embrace the forbidden nature of our connection. The sound of water dripping from the pool, the echo of our whispers, the feel of his hands on my skin, the touch of his lips against mine. It was all so incredibly intoxicating. It was like we were living in a dream, a beautiful, sensual dream that I never wanted to end. I had never imagined that I would find myself in such a situation, much less enjoy it as much as I did, with someone so much younger and so full of passion, and yet, somehow, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like I had been searching for this my entire life. But despite the growing passion between us, despite the shared laughter, despite the stolen moments of intense intimacy, and despite the moments of overwhelming joy, I couldn't shake a feeling that our time together was fleeting, that all of this was just too good to be true. I had lived long enough to know that some things, no matter how wonderful, were not meant to last forever, that everything beautiful has a way of fading away, that happiness was always temporary, and that love, that rare and precious feeling, was never guaranteed. I was just waiting for it all to crash down and for my world to fall apart again. Still, I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the present, on the way Jake made me feel, on the love that we shared. And I told myself that it was worth it, even if it was just for a fleeting moment, even if it was destined to end in heartbreak, even if it meant that my world would be destroyed once more. I was choosing to be happy, even if it was for just a little longer. One evening, after a particularly intense encounter in the changing room, our bodies still glistening with sweat, our breath still labored, I lay back against the cold tile, my body shaking, my heart pounding, and I said, "I don't know how long we can keep this up," my voice soft, but tinged with a worry that I could no longer hide, as my doubts were finally catching up to me. My fears were starting to creep back into my mind, and my resolve was finally beginning to falter. James turned to me, his brow furrowing with concern, his eyes showing a glimpse of fear for the first time. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice a whisper. "I mean this," I replied, gesturing between us, my voice trembling. It's not exactly normal, is it?" I said, stating the obvious, and all the fears that I had been suppressing for so long. It was like I was finally taking off my mask and revealing the woman that I was, the broken, confused, and imperfect woman who had been trying to hide for so long. James frowned, his eyes showing pain, but then his expression softened as if he had found the perfect words to say, the perfect actions to make me feel safe. He reached out, brushing his fingers along my cheek, his touch sending shivers along my cheek, his touch sending shivers down my spine, his gaze piercing my soul. "Does it have to be normal, Claire? Does our love have to be just like everyone else's love? Does what we have to fit into someone else's definition of right or wrong?" he asked, his voice soft, his eyes full of hope. He then added, "I care about you, Margaret. I love you. I want you. You're everything to me. And that's all that matters to me." His words were like a soothing balm, making my heart ache as I knew that he was only saying what I wanted to hear. But I wanted to believe him. I wanted it all to be real. He was so good. He was so kind. He was so everything that I had ever wanted. His words soothed my fears. His touch reassured me. And his love, even though it was probably just a lie, was all that I needed to keep going. Even if it was just for a little while longer. I knew that I could not ignore my doubts forever, that reality would always find a way to break through. But for now, I was content to let myself be swept away by the strange and beautiful connection that we had found in the most unexpected of places, in the quiet spaces between the strokes of the pool, in the stolen kisses of the locker room, and stolen kisses of the locker room, shared laughter under the warm summer sun. I knew that eventually our secret was going to be uncovered, and I had no idea what we were going to do, but for now, I was choosing to be happy, even if it was just for a moment, and even if it was all just a lie. It was my choice, and it was the only choice I could make. The pool, with its familiar sounds and sights, had become the backdrop for a story that I never thought I'd live, but one that I was grateful to have, no matter how long it lasted. I had finally found someone who I could love, and who could love me back. It was like I was learning how to breathe again, and I was not willing to give that up. Without a fight, I was finally feeling alive, and I had to hold on to that feeling for as long as I possibly could. And so, for the time being, we continued our dance, two people from very different worlds, finding something unexpected, something precious in the quiet spaces between our routines, our stolen moments, and our shared secrets. Together, we were creating something beautiful, even if it was destined to come crashing down. We were both choosing to love, even when the world was telling us not to. We were living for the moment, and we were making every second count. However, as the autumn leaves started to fall, and the days became shorter, and the nights became colder, I felt a sense of unease settling in, like a storm was brewing just over the horizon, threatening to destroy everything that we had created. And I knew that I could not hide from it for much longer, that I could not continue living in this fantasy world forever. I was going to have to face my fears, and I was going to have to make a decision about what the future was going to look like, and I was terrified. As autumn painted the landscape with hues of gold and crimson, our world, once vibrant and full of hope, began to feel increasingly fragile, like a delicate glass ornament that was on the verge of shattering. The whispers, which I had tried so hard to ignore, began to grow louder, more insistent, and more menacing, as I felt the watchful eyes of our small town start to close in on me. It was as if the universe itself was determined to tear us apart, make us face the consequences of our actions, to make us pay the price for daring to break all the rules. The stolen moments in the changing room, once our sanctuary, became tense with unspoken anxieties, our kisses less fervent, and our touches less sure. The shared laughter that I had grown to love began to feel forced and strained, and I found myself searching for answers in his eyes, desperately hoping that he could somehow make it all better. Had now become a source of fear, of doubt, and of uncertainty, as I began to wonder if it had all been a lie, as if I had been foolish to think that I could ever have something real. One evening, after another long day of pretending that everything was fine, I found myself sitting on my porch, watching the sky darken, and feeling that cold dread start to creep into my heart. Jake came over, as he always did, but his energy was different. He seemed more subdued, more distant, as if more subdued, more distant. He too could feel the shift in our world and the pressure of our secrets. I knew that we could not keep hiding forever, that the truth was about to catch up with us, and I was terrified. We sat in silence for a while, the tension between us as thick as the fog that had started to roll in, blanketing the town in a hazy shroud of uncertainty. I knew that we had to talk, that we could no longer pretend that everything was okay. But I was also so scared of what we were going to say, so scared of the words that were waiting just beneath the surface. And I did not want to open my mouth to say anything that would change the delicate balance that we were desperately trying to maintain. "What's wrong, Claire?" he asked, his voice soft, but there was a hint of worry in his tone. He always seemed to be able to see through me. I sighed and looked away, unable to meet his gaze, as my heart ached with a sadness that I had no idea how to explain. As if it had no idea how to explain, as if it had become too heavy to carry. I wanted to run away, to go back to the days of blissful ignorance, when we were just two people, exploring the unknown. But I knew that those days were gone forever, that we had crossed a line, that there was no going back to the way that things used to be. I don't know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, my words so full of a sadness that I could not hide. I just feel, I don't know, different, like the walls are closing in, like we are being watched, like we are about to be caught, and that we are going to have to pay the price for what we have done. He reached out and took my hand, his touch sending shivers down my spine, his fingers gently caressing my skin, trying to reassure me, trying to chase away the darkness that was threatening to consume me. "We're okay," he said, trying to sound confident, his voice full of forced optimism. "We have each other, that's all that matters, right?" His words were so familiar, yet they seemed so hollow, so empty. They no longer had the power to soothe my worries, as I knew that they were all just lies, as I knew that our time was running out, and that something was about to change everything. I pulled away, unable to allow him to touch me, unable to let him get that close. "It's more than that, Jake. You know it is," I said, my voice trembling, my eyes filling with tears, as I finally realized that I was also terrified for him, that I did not want him to suffer because of me, that I was ready to let him go, if it meant that he would be safe, that he would be free. It's more than just about us, it's about them, about what they think, about what they say, about what they do. His face hardened, as if he was finally starting to realize the gravity of our situation, the dangerous game that we had been playing, and the impossible situation that we had created for ourselves. "So, what are you saying? Are you saying that you want to give up? Are you saying that we should just let them win? Let them destroy what we have?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger, frustration, and despair, his youthful confidence finally starting to crumble. "Is that what you want? Is that what you want me to do? To just give up on us?" I looked away. I was so scared, my heart aching with a sadness that was so profound that I did not know how to control it. "I don't know what I want anymore," I muttered, my voice a broken whisper. "I'm so confused. I wanted to run away, to disappear, to go back to the days before we met, before the passion, before the danger, before all of this, to try and erase all the feelings, all the memories, and to finally get my life back. But I knew that it was too late, that I had crossed the line, that I was forever changed, and that there was no going back now. I had taken a bite from the forbidden fruit, and now I had to suffer the consequences. And what was so bad about it? I had found something that was so real, so profound, so important, and I was not ready to just let it go. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He was quiet for a moment, his face a mix of pain and determination, his eyes now narrowed, as if he was finally making a decision. And then he reached out and took both of my hands in his, holding them tight, if he was trying to pull me back, to keep me from falling into the darkness. "We're not going to give up," he said, his voice now firm, his eyes burning with a new intensity. "We're going to fight for this. We will not let them win. We will not let them win. Let them destroy what we have. I promise you." His words were both comforting and terrifying. He had always been so good at saying the right things, at making me believe that everything was going to be okay, that we would find a way to make it work. And for once, I finally let myself believe him. I let myself fall into his arms, into the dangerous comfort that he always managed to provide, because I knew that I was lost, that I could not save myself, and that if I was going to go down, at least I was going to go down with him. However, despite Jake's bravado, I knew that our secret was not going to remain hidden forever, and that the universe was finally going to reveal everything to the world. It was only a matter of time before the rumors would spread, and our little world was going to crumble before our loved ones, our families, and our friends would finally discover the truth. And once that happened, our lives would never be the same. I had always tried to be the same, so careful, so guarded. But now, it was as if my fate was sealed, and that there was nothing that I could do to stop it. I had given into my desire, and now I had to face the consequences. And I was terrified as the days turned into weeks. The tension between Jake and I became almost unbearable. I tried to keep up the facade, to act as if everything was normal, but I could feel it all slipping away. I could feel us slowly drifting apart, and there was nothing that I could do to stop it. Our moments together were becoming shorter and less intimate, and the distance between us was growing with every passing day. I wanted to reach out to him, to pull him back, to try and hold on to what we had, but I also knew that I had to let him go, that I had to accept the fact that it was not meant to last forever, that our time was over. I was lost. I was broken. I was ready to just give up. One morning, as I was preparing for work, I received a call from Sarah, my best friend. Her voice was so full of pain and fear that my heart immediately skipped a beat and all my anxiety came rushing back. "Claire," she said, her voice trembling, "you need to come home now. You need to come to my house. It's about Jake, about what you've been doing." The way that she said his name, the coldness in her voice, made my heart ache and my blood run cold, and I knew that it was finally over. I did not know how she found out. I did not know what had happened, but I knew that she was not calling to offer support. I knew that she was about to reveal everything, to expose my secret, to bring my world crashing down around me. And I felt like I was about to have a heart attack. I tried to tell her that I was busy, that I could not just leave, but she cut me off, her voice sharper, her tone more intense. "You need to come now, Claire. It's important. And he's here," she said. And then she hung up, leaving me there, alone, terrified, and then completely unprepared for what was about to happen next. I quickly got dressed, called a taxi, and I made my way to Sarah's house, my body trembling, my hands sweating, and my mind racing with fear. As the taxi sped through the streets, I thought about everything that had happened, the love, the passion, the happiness, the pain, the betrayal, and I knew that I was about to lose everything, that everything was about to come crashing down, and I did not know if I was strong enough to face it. I had tried so hard to escape the pain of my past, and now it was here, in the flesh, staring me right in the face, and I could not run away any longer. I was trapped, and my time was up. I was about to pay the price for my desire. As the taxi pulled up in front of Sarah's house, I took a deep breath and stepped out, my legs feeling heavy, as if they were made of lead. I knew that I was about to enter into a world of chaos, of pain, of judgment, and of heartbreak. And I had no idea if I was going to survive. But I also knew that I had to face my fears, and that I had to face them head on. I was done hiding. I was ready to face my destiny. The moment I stepped out of the taxi, I felt a sense of dread, as if a sense of dread, were walking into a trap that had been meticulously set just for me. The familiar quiet of Sarah's neighborhood now felt menacing. The manicured lawns and the perfect houses, now a facade of domestic bliss, hiding a darkness that I had become all too familiar with. I could not shake the feeling that I was about to cross the threshold into something truly terrible. As I walked up the steps to Sarah's front door, my heart pounded in my chest, each step heavy and labored, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. I took a deep breath and knocked on the door, trying to prepare myself for what was about to happen next. I knew that I could not run, that I had to face my fears, that I had to accept whatever was waiting for me on the other side. It was time. The door swung open, revealing Sarah standing there, her face a mask of cold anger, her eyes burning with a fury that made me want to recoil. She was beautiful, as always, but tonight, her beautiful, as always, but tonight, was like ice, cold, sharp, and unforgiving. She looked at me, her gaze so full of hate, and said, "Come in, Claire. We've been waiting for you." Her voice was soft, yet full of venom, and I knew that all of my lies, all my secrets, carefully constructed illusions were about to shatter into a million pieces. I stepped inside, and the scene before me was like something out of a nightmare. In the living room, I saw Jake, his face pale, his body shaking, and all the youthful confidence that I had always admired now gone, replaced by a look of utter defeat. He looked broken, defeated, and ashamed, and in his eyes, I could see a reflection of my own pain and my own guilt, as well as a fear of what was about to come next. He looked at me, and he lowered his gaze, as if he could not even bear to look me in the eye. Sarah was leaning against the fireplace, her arms crossed over her chest, her body radiating a sense of controlled anger, her gaze piercing through me, exposing all my flaws and all my imperfections. She was not going to make this easy for me. She was going to make me pay. I knew that. She spoke, her voice like ice. "So, you finally decided to grace us with your presence. You know, I've always been curious. Just what is it that makes you so special?" Her words were a barb to my soul, a direct hit that made me want to crumble, to hide, to run away, but I stood my ground. I was not going to give her the satisfaction. I tried to keep my voice calm and my face neutral, but my body was trembling, and I could feel the fear rising to the surface, threatening to take over completely. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice barely a whisper, my words full of dread. Sarah laughed, a cold, mocking laugh that made my skin crawl. "Oh, please, don't pretend, Claire. We both know why you're here. You thought that you were so clever, right? Playing both sides, having the best of both worlds. But you're not as smart as you thought you were." Her words were so sharp, so brutal, so cutting, and they made my body feel weak and my mind want to explode. But still, I stood there, silent. I stood there, silent. If I was waiting for the axe to fall, it was all over. There was nothing that I could do. My life was about to be destroyed. "Let's get this over with," I muttered, my eyes fixed on the floor. "Oh, we're going to get this over with," she replied, her voice now rising, the anger barely contained. "But not before you tell me why. Why did you have to do this to me? Why did you have to break all of this just for your own selfish pleasure?" I did not know how to answer her, because I did not know the answer myself. I had been so lost, so broken, so confused. I had no idea what had driven me down this path, and I had no explanation for my actions, except for the fact that I had been so weak, so foolish, so selfish. I had been a liar, and now I was finally paying the price. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion. I don't know. I was just so lost, I was so broken, and I just wanted to feel something," I confessed, as the truth finally started to come out. I did not mean to hurt anyone. I had no idea that all of this was going to happen. It was never my intention to do any of this. My voice had started to break. My tears were finally beginning to fall. My carefully constructed facade was finally beginning to crumble. She laughed again, a hollow and empty sound that made my skin crawl. "Wow, you were just pathetic. How can you even call that an apology? You are nothing more than a self-serving liar." She then paused and looked at me, her eyes narrowed, her voice cold as ice. "You see, I've known about you and Jamie for a while now, and I also know about Jake. I've known everything from the beginning." My heart skipped a beat. How could she know? How could she have seen into my secrets? It was then that I realized that I had never been in control, that I had just been playing a part in a game that had been set up long before I had ever arrived. I was nothing more than a pawn. You knew. I stuttered, my voice full of fear, and my body trembling from the sudden shock. She smiled, a dark and sinister smile that chilled me to the bone. "Oh yes, honey, I knew everything. You see, I'm not as stupid as you all think. I have my ways. I have my sources. And I always get what I want. You just needed to be a little more careful if you didn't want all of this to happen to you. But you didn't. You had to be so careless. You had to show off your new expensive life. And that, my dear, was your downfall." She then walked over to Jake, her eyes full of a mixture of anger and pity. "And you pathetic boy," she said, looking at him, her words full of contempt. "You are just as bad as she is. You went after my husband's mistress, and you used her too. You know better than he is." I looked at Jake. His face was pale. His body was still shaking. He couldn't meet my gaze. His eyes were full of shame and regret. He did not say a word. He could not say a word. He could not even defend himself. She turned back to me, her eyes burning with a fiery rage that made my body tremble. "And now, you're going to pay, both of you. You will not get away with this," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. I stood there, my world falling apart around me, feeling the weight of my sins, the pain of my mistakes, the shame of my actions, and the hopelessness that had finally taken control of me. I was finally ready for this. I was finally ready to be punished, as I knew that I deserved it all. I was just a pathetic woman, a liar, a cheater, and a broken soul. And now it was time for me to finally pay the price. I was ready. Sarah walked over to a side table and grabbed a small black box. She placed it on the table and opened it, revealing a pile of photographs, my pictures, with Jamie, with Ryan, and even with Tony. I was shocked. How could she have known about everything? It was as if she could see through me, into my very soul. She pulled out a match and lit it, her eyes full of a cold determination. "You think you're so clever, huh? You think you're so special. You think that you can play with other people's lives and you will get away with it?" she asked, her voice full of anger, her body shaking with rage. Then she began to slowly burn each photo, one by one, watching as the fire consumed them, melting away the memories, the moments, the lies, and all the secrets that they held. "This is what you all deserve," she said, her voice trembling. "This is what happens to those who dare to cross me, and this is what will happen to you, to both of you." I did not flinch. I did not beg. I just stood there, silently, as she burned all the pictures. All my secrets were finally being exposed. I watched them turn to ash, finally giving up on the fantasy and on the lies that I had been telling myself for so long. It was over. It was finally over. It was then that I finally accepted the truth, that I was just a broken woman, a pawn in a game that I had no control over, a woman who had been used, abused, and discarded, and I'd finally run out of lies to tell myself. Sarah turned her attention to me. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "Now it's time for you to leave and to never come back. You understand me? If you ever come near me or my family again, then I will make you regret the day that you were born. Are we clear?" she said, her voice cold, her body tense, her whole demeanor a threat. It was like she was finally showing me who she truly was, a woman of power, of wealth, and of complete control. I nodded, my body numb, my mind blank, my heart finally breaking. I was not going to argue with her. I knew that she was right, that I had gotten what I deserved. She had won, I had lost, it was over. "Now get out of my house," she hissed, before I decided to do something that I might regret. I looked at Jake, his eyes pleading, his face covered in tears, and for a moment I wanted to reach out to him, to touch him, to hold him, to tell him that everything was going to be okay. But I could not. I was not worthy of him. I hurt him enough, and it was time for me to let him go. It was time for me to finally set him free. and to let him live his life without me. I turned around and walked out of the house, leaving behind my carefully constructed lies and the ruins of my broken dreams. I was finally free, but also completely alone. The cool night air hit me like a physical blow as I stepped out of Sarah's house. The weight of her words and the intensity of her anger still echoing in my mind. I walked aimlessly, my body numb, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I did not know where to go or what to do. The carefully constructed world that I had built around myself was now shattered, reduced to ashes, and I was left with nothing but the ruins of my broken heart and my tarnished soul. As I was completely lost, I was done playing a game. I had finally reached the end of the line, and I was now faced with the raw and painful consequences of my choices. The lies had finally caught up with me, and the price that I had to pay was higher than I could have ever imagined. I had been so foolish to think that I could escape my past, that I could outrun my demons, that I could somehow find happiness in a world built on deception. And now I was left with nothing but an emptiness that was so profound that it threatened to swallow me whole. I wandered through the streets like a ghost, with no clear destination, the familiar streets of a town now feeling so strange, so unfamiliar, so hostile. The city lights, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock me with their brilliance, reflecting all the pain, all the shame, and all the desperation that I was feeling inside. I had built my life on lies, and now the truth had caught up with me, and I was being punished for everything. I had deserved everything that was happening to me. I found myself standing by the beach, the waves crashing against the shore, a constant reminder of the power of foul nature and my own powerlessness. I looked out at the vast dark ocean, my reflection barely visible in its depths. I wanted to disappear, to be swallowed by the darkness, to become nothing more than a memory, a ghost that nobody would ever see again. I had failed myself, I had failed my family, and now I had no idea what I was supposed to do. I had lost all direction, and I was completely lost. I was broken. I spent that night wandering the streets. I was nothing but a ghost, lost in the world. And when the sun finally rose, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, I finally decided to go back to my apartment. I was tired, and I wanted to sleep. I had not slept well for what seemed like ages. I had to get myself together because there was so much more to do. I knew that as I walked through the empty streets, I was so tired. I was so broken. I was ready to just give up, to lie down, to surrender, to allow the darkness to take me. But then I thought of Mike, of all the dreams we had shared, of all the hopes we had for the future. I did not want to let him down. I had to keep going. I had to keep living. I had to find a way to be strong again. I had to be the woman that I had always wanted to be. I had to find a way to forgive myself. It was the only choice I had. I returned to my apartment and I started to pack my bags. I knew that I could not stay there, that I needed to leave, to get away from everything and everyone. It was time for me to start again, for once and for all. I gathered all my belongings, the clothes, the books, the notes, the pens, everything that I would need to start a new chapter in a new world. I wanted to pack all of my memories too, everything that had made me who I was, all the pain, all the lies, but also all the moments of happiness, all the love, and all the passion. I wanted to carry those with me as a reminder of where I had been and how far I had come. I had learned a lot about myself and about the world around me, and I was finally ready to use those lessons for good. I looked around at the apartment, all the things that Jamie had given me, my fancy clothes, my expensive car, my fancy apartment, and I felt nothing but disgust. These were all symbols of the woman that I had been trying to become, a person that I no longer recognized, a person that I did not want to be, and a person that had caused so much pain. Look at the mirror. and I saw a woman who was battered, bruised, and broken, a woman who had lost her way, but who was also ready to find her way home, a woman who was finally ready to face her destiny. I gathered my things and went to the bus stop. It was time to leave. As I was sitting on the bus, I took out my notebook and started to write, pouring out all my thoughts, all my feelings, and all the experiences that had changed me. I wrote about Mike, about Jamie, about Sarah, about Nike, about Jamie, about Sarah, about Tony, about all the people who had touched my life in one way or another. I wrote about the pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the guilt, the shame, and the overwhelming sense of despair. But I also wrote about the hope, the resilience, the strength, and the love that still resided within me, despite everything that had happened. It was like I was finally coming to terms with my past, making peace with my mistakes, and finally accepting myself for who I was, and for who I was, and for who I was meant to be. As the bus rumbled down the highway, carrying me farther and farther away from Tampa and from my old life, I knew that I had finally broken free from the gilded cage that I had built for myself. I was now embarking on a new journey. One's now embarking on a new journey that I knew would be difficult and challenging, but also one that I knew was going to be worth it. I was finally going home. I did not know where home was, but I knew that I was about to find it, and I was ready to embrace it, no matter what it looked like, no matter what it was going to take, and no matter what I had to do. It was time for my rebirth. I was ready. My thoughts were then interrupted when I felt my phone buzz. It was a text from Tony. His messages always managed to calm me down. "Hey," he wrote, "just checking in. You okay? I know you're probably on the road." I replied, "Yeah, I'm fine. How are you?" The answer came quickly. "I'm good. Just waiting for you to get here so we can finally start our adventure. And just so you know, I'm here. Just so you know that you're not alone." It was then that I looked back at the city and I saw that the sun was rising and the day was starting again. I smiled and I finally let myself feel that flicker of hope, that spark of life, knowing that I had made the right decision, that I was finally on the right path, and that I was going to be okay. At last, I was on my way home, and I was ready to start again. I was finally free. Meanwhile, Jake was left to grapple with his own turmoil. The truth about Ave's past, the intensity of Sarah's anger, and the loss of a connection that had meant everything to him, sent him spiraling into a whirlwind of confusion, regret, and self-doubt. His youthful confidence, once his defining characteristic, had been shattered by the harsh reality of their situation. He had fallen for Ava hard and fast, and now he had to come to terms with the fact that the beautiful, mature woman who had captured his heart was not the woman that he thought that she was a woman who was damaged, who was flawed, and a woman who had secrets that had nearly destroyed them all. He returned to his apartment, the silence feeling oppressive, the echoes of their shared laughter, the memories of their whispered confessions, and the ghost of her touch all surrounded him, mocking him with what had been lost. He found himself pacing, unable to sleep, his mind racing with a million different questions, his heart aching with a pain that was almost unbearable. He had been so sure, so certain of his feelings for Ava. He had believed that his love for her was strong enough to overcome anything, and he was so wrong. He felt like a fool, a naive, idealistic boy who had been blinded by his own desires and who had now finally paid the price. He had been drawn to Ave's maturity, to her wisdom, and to her strength, and he had completely ignored the red flags, the warnings from his friends, and the doubts that had been nagging at the back of his mind. He had thought that they had shared something special, that they were building a connection that was real, but he was now forced to face the truth, that he had just been another pawn in her game, that he was just another man who had been drawn to her beauty, and who had been blinded by his own desires. He was disgusted by himself. He knew that he had to find her, that he had to talk to her, that he had to understand what had happened, to try and make sense of the chaos that had taken over his life. But he also knew that she did not want to see him, that she did not want to hear his apologies or his explanations, that he had hurt her too much, and that she would probably want to stay as far away from him as possible. His heart ached with guilt, with regret, and with a sense of overwhelming loss. He had lost his best friend, and he had lost the woman that he had thought that he loved, and he had no idea how he was ever going to make it right. He was lost, he was broken, and he was all alone, and it was all his fault. Next few weeks in a haze of despair, drinking too much, not sleeping, barely working, and alienating everyone around him. He had given up on his art, he had given up on his friends, he had given up on himself. He was just waiting for it all to end. He did not know what he wanted, and he did not know what he was going to do. All that he knew was that he was not the same, and he would never be the same again. It was then that his friend and roommate David finally had enough. David finally had enough, found him sitting in the dark, staring out the window, his body trembling, his eyes red and swollen, and his face a mask of pain. David knew that he had to do something, that he had to snap him out of this despair, that he had to bring him back from the brink of destruction. He was tired of watching him destroy himself, and he was also tired of being his therapist. But he knew that Jake was too lost to help himself, and that he needed someone to push him in the right direction. "Enough," he said, his voice sharp and firm, his eyes narrowed, his face full of determination. "You can't keep living like this, Jake. You have to stop feeling sorry for yourself. It's been weeks. It's time to let her go. You've been a mess ever since she left, and you know that she will never come back. What are you going to do with yourself?" Jake looked up at David, his eyes dull, his body slumped, his face still wet with tears, and he shrugged. "I don't know," he mumbled, his voice hoarse from crying. "I've lost her. I've lost everything. I can't do this anymore." He reached for the bottle and took another long drink, his actions full of self-loathing, full of anger, and full of pain. David grabbed the bottle from his hand and threw it against the wall, the glass shattering with a loud crash that startled Jake and made him finally look at him, his eyes finally focusing on something other than his own pain, his own misery, his own despair. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice full of shock. David pointed a finger at him, his voice sharp, his gaze unwavering. "I'm trying to wake you up, you idiot. You can't keep doing this to yourself, to me, to everyone who cares about you," he shouted, his words piercing through the fog that had been clouding Jake's mind. "You're not the only person who's ever been hurt. You're not the only person who's ever been betrayed. You're not the only person who's ever lost everything. You have to man up, and you have to face reality. And then you need to pick yourself back up again, because that's what we're supposed to do." His words were full of anger, but also full of love, full of hope, and full of the strength that Jake had been trying so desperately to find within himself. And for the first time in weeks, Jake started to listen. He started to see, understand what his friend had been trying to tell him. He knew that he could not continue to live in the past, that he had to move on, and that he had to try to make something of himself. He knew that if he did not do something, that he was going to lose himself completely. He needed to find a way to heal. He needed to find a way to forgive himself. And he needed to find a way to move on. David's harsh words, like a splash of cold water to the face, had finally shaken Jake out of his self-pitying stupor. He looked at his friend, his eyes still red and swollen, but now they also held a flicker of something that had been missing, a hint of determination, and a touch of hope. He knew that David was right. He couldn't keep living in the darkness. He couldn't keep letting his past consume him. and he knew that he had to start taking responsibility for his own life, for his own mistakes, and for his own future. He took a deep breath, as if he was filling himself with air, and then he spoke, his voice still shaky, but now full of a newfound strength. "You're right," he muttered, his words barely above a whisper. "I can't keep doing this. I have to move on. I have to find a way to get through this." David nodded, his face softening, a mixture of relief and admiration washing over him. His anger slowly dissipating, replaced with a sense of concern and also a glimmer of pride. "Good," he said, his voice now gentle, his touch full of support. "Now, tell me what you're going to do. What is your plan?" Jake looked around the apartment, his eyes lingering on the familiar surroundings, at the remnants of the life that he had been living, the life that he had now lost, the life that he could never go back to. And he knew that he needed to let it go, that he had to leave it behind, and that he had to embark on a new adventure, on a new journey, and to make something meaningful with his life. He took a deep breath, and then he turned back to David, his eyes full of a newfound purpose. "Going to paint," he said, his voice now strong, his eyes now clear, his hands now steady. "I'm going to paint my pain, my love, my hope, and my dreams, and I'm going to share it all with the world." And so, that was exactly what he did. He started to paint all day and all night, as if he was possessed by some divine muse, and he poured all his emotions, all his experiences, and all his thoughts onto the canvas, using bright colors, bold strokes, and raw, intense images to express all the things that he could not say with words. His art became his therapy, his refuge, his way to heal, and his way to finally make sense of his life. He also started to go back to his old routine. He started teaching swimming again, and found joy in helping others, in sharing his love for the water and his passion for life. He spent time with his friends, he went to the bars, and he found that he was actually able to laugh, to enjoy life again, without feeling that deep, gnawing ache in his heart. He had finally started to heal. He was still broken. He still carried the scars from his past, but he was now stronger, and he was now wiser, and he was finally ready to move forward. He was now determined to not let his past define his future. He also finally realized that he could not keep living in that same old apartment. It was too full of memories, and all the ghosts of his past were all still hanging around, reminding him of the choices he had made, and the mistakes he had made, and all the pain that he had caused to himself and to others. It was time to let it go. It was time to start again. He packed his belongings, and he told David that he was moving, that he needed to find his own path, that he had to become his own man, and that he had to let go of the past and move forward to his future. David, with a knowing smile and a pat on his shoulder, just hugged him and wished him all the best. He knew that Jake was finally ready, that Jake was finally strong enough, and that Jake was finally taking the first steps towards healing. Jake found a small apartment in a different part of town. It was quiet, small, and cozy, with a big window overlooking the city. It was a blank canvas waiting for him to create something new. He spent his time painting and teaching and connecting with the world around him, and he slowly started to build a new life for himself, a life that was full of hope, and a life that was full of hope, finally his own. He knew that he would never forget about Ava, that she would always have a special place in his heart, but he also knew that he had to let her go, that he had to move on, and that he had to find a way to love himself again. Meanwhile, I was finally starting to find my own rhythm in my new life. In the small town in Oregon, I was finally starting to sleep through the night. I was finally starting to feel safe. I had created a new routine for myself. I would go to work in the bookstore, surrounded by stories, by words, and by the wisdom of the ages. And then I would come home to my small cottage, where I would write and paint, trying to make sense of it all. The silence of the town helped to soothe my spirit, and the quiet moments alone with myself helped me to finally start to reflect on my life, my choices, and my journey. I was trying to make sense of it all. I was trying to find a way to understand how I had gotten to that point, and to forgive myself for all the mistakes that I had made. I also started to read more, discovering new authors, new perspectives, new stories, and I was slowly starting to understand that my story was not unique, that we all have our own struggles, our own pain, and our own desires, and that the only way to find some semblance of peace was to accept them, to embrace them, and to learn from them. I was not a bad person. I was just a person who had made mistakes, who had been hurt, and who was now learning how to heal. The bookstore became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape from the noise of the outside world and immerse myself in the world of words, ideas, and human emotion. I would spend hours reading, getting lost in Thought-provoking pages, exploring different cultures, different worlds, and different lives. And I started to understand that I was not alone, that there were people all over the world who had gone through similar experiences, and that there was hope for me too. I would also spend my time writing, pouring all my thoughts, all my feelings, all my experiences, and all my secrets onto the pages, trying to make sense of the pain, the betrayal, the love, the loss, and all the complicated emotions that had defined my life. I wrote about Mike, about Jamie, about Sarah, about Tony, about Mabel, and about all the people who had touched my life in one way or another. I was finally finding my voice, and I was finally ready to tell my story to the world. It was my way of taking back control, of reclaiming my identity, and of finally finding peace. One day, as I was sitting at my desk writing, Tony came in, his eyes shining with excitement, his face flushed with joy. "Ava," he said, his voice full of pride. "I think you're ready. I think you've done it." He was holding a newspaper in his hands, and he placed it on my desk. "Look at this." I looked at the newspaper, and I saw an article about my book, about my story, about my journey, and a photo of me, my face no longer full of fear, but full of hope and also of determination. I was now ready to be seen. And for the first time in a long time, I was starting to feel proud of who I was and of the life that I was starting to create, my eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling. "Thank you for everything, your kindness, your support, your love, and for believing in me, even when I did not believe in myself." He smiled and took my hand, his eyes full of warmth and his voice full of tenderness. "I always believed in you, Ava, and I always will. Now, let's go celebrate." We went to the bar, the lighthouse, where Tony was now working full-time, and we toasted to our future, to our friendship, to our love, and to all the new adventures that were waiting for us on the other side. We did not know what the future held, but for the first time, we were not scared. We were together, we were strong, we were ready. But I knew that there was one piece of my story that I had yet to finish, one loose end that I had to tie up. In order to finally be free, I knew that I had to find Jake, I had to talk to him, and that I had to make peace with the past in order to move forward into my future. And so, with a heart full of hope, and also with a touch of fear, I decided to embark on one more journey to the place where it all began, to see him, to make peace, and to finally let him go. I did not know where he was or what he was doing, but I had to try. I was ready to face my demons, to finally close this chapter of my life, and to move on to the next one. I called David, Jake's roommate, and he told me that Jake had moved to the West Coast, to Los Angeles. He said that he had not heard from him in a while, but that he knew that he was doing well, that he knew that he was doing well. He was working hard, and that he was finally finding his path. I thanked him, and then I made my plans. I booked my tickets, and I prepared to leave, and I knew that I was finally ready I was finally ready to see him. I was finally ready to let him go, and I was finally ready to write my own happy ending. My heart beat faster, and my hands started to shake as I got on the plane. I did not know if Jake wanted to see me, or if he wanted to hear from me, but I knew that I had to try. I knew that I could not move on until I had finally made peace with my past. As the plane took off, and I looked down at the city below, I knew that I was finally ready to face the final chapter of my story. I was ready. The sprawling metropolis of Los Angeles felt both familiar and foreign, a chaotic blend of vibrant energy and quiet desperation. Much like the state of my heart, the city, with its endless possibilities and its myriad of broken dreams, was a stark reminder of broken dreams. Everything that I had been through, and of all the mistakes that I had made, I had come here to find Jake, but I had also come to find myself. I knew that I could not move on until I had finally faced him, until I had finally found a way to let him go for good. I found a small hotel near the beach, and after settling in, I spent the next few days searching for him, revisiting old haunts and asking people if they had seen him. I felt like a ghost wandering through the city, haunted by my past, by my desires, and by my fears, and I was growing more and more desperate with each passing day. I did not know where he was, or if he even wanted to see me, or if I was just chasing a ghost, a memory, a dream that was never going to come true. And I was getting tired. I was starting to lose hope. I finally tracked down a small art studio in a rundown neighborhood near the arts district. I hesitated at the door. I wanted to give up, but I had come too far to turn back, and I knew that if I did not do this now, that I would always regret it, that my past would always haunt me, that I would never be free. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The studio was small and cluttered, with paint cans, brushes, and iron canvases strewn all over the floor, the smell of turpentine thick in the air. There, at the center of the room, with his back to me, was Jake, his body silhouetted against the window, the sunlight streaming in around him, creating a halo around his head. He was like an angel. He was still as breathtaking as the first time I had ever seen him. I just stood there, watching him, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat, a mixture of love, longing, fear, and regret, all swirling inside of me, all competing for my attention. He turned around and saw me, his eyes widening in surprise, his hand pausing mid-stroke, as if he had just seen a ghost, as if I was nothing more than a figment of his imagination. He looked older, his face was tired, his body was leaner, and there was something different about his eyes, a hardness, a sadness, and a worldliness that I had never seen before. Time, it seemed, had changed us both, had carved new lines into our faces, had forced us both to grow up, to face reality, and to finally confront our demons. Ava, he said, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes searching mine, his face full of a strange mixture of disbelief, sadness, and also a touch of hope. What are you doing here? I needed to see you, Jake, I said, my voice trembling, my body shaking, as I finally allowed myself to show him how much he still meant to me. It was time. It was now or never. I was no longer going to hide. I was done running away from the pain. I was done pretending that it did not matter. I was ready to face everything, to lay it all out there, and to see what would come next. He put down his brush and slowly walked towards me. The space between us, feeling like an ocean, the air around us thick with tension and anticipation. He stopped in front of me, his body only inches away from mine. I looked into his eyes, and I saw a reflection of my own pain, a glimpse of all the things that we had both been through, all the things that we had both lost. And for a moment, I let myself fall back into those feelings, into that old familiar territory. And it was like I was reliving everything all over again. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice full of pain, his eyes wet with tears. I'm so sorry for everything that happened. I never wanted to hurt you, Ava. I never wanted to cause you any pain. You were everything to me, and I ruined it. I destroyed everything. And I'm so sorry. I shook my head, tears starting to stream down my face, and my body trembling. It wasn't your fault, Jake, I said, my voice barely a whisper, my words full of a pain that was almost unbearable. It was mine. I was so lost, so broken. I did not know how to let myself be loved. I did not know how to embrace the happiness that you were offering me, and I ended up hurting you too. And I'm so sorry. It was the truth. It had always been the truth. I had been trying to blame him, to make him the reason for all my pain. But I knew that that was a lie, a way for me to avoid facing my own demons. We sat in silence for a moment, staring at each other, finally acknowledging the pain, the regret, and the love that had always been there, lingering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to come out. We both knew that we could not go back, that we could not undo the things that had happened, and we also knew that we had to move on, that we had to let go, and that we had to let go, and that we had to let go. Had to find a way to finally be free. I think I understand, he finally said, his voice softer now, his eyes searching mine. I know that I was young, and I was naive, and that I was not ready for what we had, but I also know that what we had was real, and that it will always be a part of me. He then paused and looked at me, his eyes full of love, and also a strange mixture of understanding and acceptance. I will never forget you, Ava. You changed my life. You made me feel things that I had never felt before, and I will always be grateful for that. I felt a sense of peace, finally, a feeling that had been eluding me for so long, as if I was finally ready to move on, to put my past behind me, and to embrace a future that was full of uncertainty, but also full of hope. I had finally found my voice, and I was ready to use it. I had found my strength, and I was ready to use it to help others. I had been so afraid of the future, but now I was finally ready to embrace it. I know, I said, my voice now calm, my eyes now clear. I know what you mean. We both needed to learn those lessons, and we both had to go through what we had to go through in order to finally get to this place. And that's all that matters, right? I asked, reaching out to touch his hand. He smiled, the same heart-melting smile that I had always loved. It is, he replied, his gaze full of warmth, his eyes reflecting my own peace. We talked for hours, sharing our experiences, our regrets, our hopes, and our dreams. We spoke of the future, of all the things that we had been planning, all the things that we wanted to do, and we finally accepted that our paths were meant to diverge, that we were meant to go our separate ways, but also that we would never forget the lessons that we had learned from each other and the impact that we had both had on each other's lives. It was time to let each other go, to finally say goodbye, and to finally set each other free. As the fall sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, I stood up, ready to leave. I looked at Jake, his face etched with a combination of love and sadness, but also with a sense of peace, and finally, I smiled. I have to go now, I said. Might have to go now, I said, voice calm, my heart at peace. It was good to see you, Jake. I'm glad that you're finally happy. He stood up and walked towards me, his eyes full of warmth, his touch gentle. You too, Claire, he whispered. You were never broken. You were never broken. You were just on a long journey to find yourself, and I'm glad that you finally made it. He then took my hand and led me towards the door, and when we reached the entrance, he looked at me with a smile that touched my soul, and he said, I will always remember you, Ava. You were my forbidden echo, and you changed my life forever. And with that, he kissed me, softly, gently, a kiss that was full of peace, gratitude, and acceptance, a final goodbye that was free of all the past mistakes, all the lies, all the betrayal, and all the pain, I walked out of the studio, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely and utterly free. I had finally made peace with my past. I had finally forgiven myself, and I was finally forgiven myself, ready to embrace the future with all its possibilities and with all its uncertainties. And I was not afraid anymore. I was ready to let go and to finally embrace my own story, my own journey, and to finally find a way to my own happy ending. I returned to Oregon, and I continued to write and to share my story with the world. I was no longer running away from my past, but I was using my experiences to empower others, to inspire them, and to show them that anything is possible. Remain my best friend and also my partner, and together we continue to build our life, a life filled with love, with laughter, with friendship, and with everything that we had both ever wanted. We found peace together. Past, I never saw Jake again, but I often thought about him, his passion, his strength, and also his gentle touch. He was a part of my story, a memory that would always be etched into my soul, and I would always cherish the time that we had shared. I knew that he had finally found his path, and I was content to let him go with a heart full of gratitude and with a soul that was finally free. I also knew that, in time, he too would find his own happy ending. I continued to write, sharing my story and the stories of all the women that I had met, and my books touched the lives of countless people, inspiring them, empowering them, and showing them that it was possible to find love, hope, and redemption, even in the darkest of times. And as for me, well, I was finally at peace. I had finally found my voice, I had finally found my purpose, and I had finally found a love that was real, a love that was true, and a love that was going to last a lifetime. And that is all that I had ever truly wanted. I had finally learned to love myself, to forgive myself, and I had finally learned to live. And that was the greatest gift of all. The echoes of desire, the remnants of my past, were always going to be a part of me, but I knew that they would never control me again. I had finally learned to set myself free.